Anybody who studied psychology here? Psychology in school, college? Or for UPSC? Good. For UPSC or college? Maybe we'll take your help where necessary. I'm starting to talk, okay? It's like once it starts, it doesn't stop. So you'll have to be. We start with the backdrop of this school. Before I go into the backdrop of it, I'll have to mention that this had been. వచ్చేయండి మాస్టర్ ఫాస్ట్ ఫాస్ట్ మనం సీట్ల సెలక్షన్ టైం లేదు. తెలుగు వస్తామా? తెలుగు తెలుగు రాకపోతే అడ్మిషన్ ఇవ్వద్దని చెప్పాను నేను. యూ డోంట్ నో హౌ మచ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ ట్రబుల్సమ్ టు నాట్ టు టాక్ ఇన్ తెలుగు. తెలుగులో మాట్లాడుకుంటే హాయిగా ఉంటుంది. మీకు కూడా ఎవరో అన్నారు తెలుగులో చెప్పండి మేడం అని. తెలుగులో ఆంథ్రోపాలజీ చెప్పాలని నాకు కూడా ఉంటుంది. అదే విశ్వక్సేనుని కుమారుడు అయిపోద్ది, మనం ఏం చేయలేము. అండ్ ఐ వాంటెడ్ టు స్టార్ట్ తెలుగు లాంగ్వేజ్ క్లాసెస్ ఆల్సో for non-Telugu students before they actually are inducted into anthropology classes. Now, what is the basic requirement, the knowledge and things like that. Yeah. So this topic has been, if at all I can say this, one of the favorite topics of UPSC. Most of the occasions big questions have come. I will first show you some of the questions. Then we will talk about the backdrop of it. We will watch a small AV and then too many other things to do. That is the other title, Psychological Anthropology. Culture person. I'm so sorry for the kind of color that I was using. It may be called Culture Personality School or Psychological Anthropology. And maybe we will try listing out some of the questions there. These are some of the questions. When it comes to the first one, is mentioned in those terms in chapter 1, paper 1, relations with other disciplines. In the old UPSC syllabus, they used to mention it as psychology, but in the new UPSC syllabus, we see it as behavioral sciences, relation between behavioral sciences and anthropology. So it can also be asked, it was asked as psychological anthro, national character studies, basic personality, model personality. And then once you finish taking down those names, those questions, relation between psychology and anthropology, psychological anthropology, national character studies, basic personality, model personality. Sir, and there have been questions such as, you can write one other question continuing after model personality. Questions like, write an essay on the contributions of Margaret Mead Ruth Benedict, and Kardiner, Kardiner. Any problem with the spellings of the three people? Ruth Benedict, Margaret Mead, and Kardiner to anthropological thought. Sir, it has been a long time since this question has been asked, so I am planning to discuss this also in your batch. Contributions of Ralph Linton. Contributions of Ralph Linton. Can I go? Now, these are some of the questions. Out of these, the one that you have written, contributions of so and so, that has been a big question. All these are generally for shorter questions. Maybe perhaps this can be for both short and long questions. That can be for both short and long questions. Psychological anthropology. Let me take you to the backdrop of it. Are you fine? Done? Sir, this school had emerged in the North America. So, I mean, unlike any other major school of anthropological thought, this is the one that had emerged majorly due to the events, due to the encouragement from the North America, whether you call it the government's contributions from USA or scholars there were getting interested in this particular direction of study. So, emergence of psychological anthropology can be majorly associated with American anthropology. So far, whatever schools we have come across, never did we say this. If it was an evolutionism, mostly it was Britain. To some extent, maybe it was a scholar like Morgan who emerged. So we don't say that classical evolutionism can be directly related to, because a whole lot of influence was there of the British anthropology on Morgan. So we cannot bring him as the originator of this tendency. I cannot personally give up start going into the origins of everything, because that has been the nature of anthropology. In most of the books, if we see, the origins of culture personality school are actually traced to a set of thinkers, the whole lot of them that are mentioned in your syllabus, like Linton or Kardiner, whatever. Most of the books actually trace it to that. And these events were happening in 1920s, starting from 1920s. But earlier to 1920s also, because anything will not emerge all of a sudden. When an academic discussion begins, there would be some kind of a background based on which people would start to write. So during the period between 1910 and 1920, when some of the thinkers from USA, they started questioning certain aspects of classical evolutionism, this school started looking at the variant that was not focused at in the rest of the world. So, see, the emergence of anthropology, if we observe, if we categorize into two blocks, one European, one American. The European lot we came into contact. I mean, we studied like moving from evolution to diffusion to historical particular or certain other things, functionalism, etc. That was majorly a trend that was happening in Europe. In America, we see a major emergence starting from culture personality. So what we can observe is, when the rest of the world was talking about things like function, or things like how culture was spreading, kind of discussions when they were happening in the rest of the world, USA was getting interested in something that was not there in the rest of the scholars, rest of the discipline. In that sense, they were giving, and not intentionally, but they were giving something that was unique, which can be associated permanently to American anthropology. Now, when I am saying that, classical evolutionism, the critique against classical evolutionism has a direct link with culture personality school. This is one dimension. So, during 1910s, some of the scholars started questioning certain elements of cultural evolutionism. In a way, you can see some parallel in Beauvoisian criticism. But we will go into the details. When we go into the details, we will be able to draw a continuation from classical evolution to culture personality school. I think that is where evolutionism has to be accommodated in your writings, not that a full-fledged question of evolutionism is an expected one. Everybody goes back to the same thing. All schools somewhere or the other go back to classical evolution. One of the triggering point there is when they were believing that cultures were evolving from the so-called savagery to civilization, they are more or less giving a plan for all the societies. So, it is like what is going to be my future, that is already given, meaning that a determined future is actually something propagated by classical evolution. A determined future. I mean, when I am using these words, this is the way how culture personality thinkers were writing about classical evolution. Because so far we did not come across this word of determined future. The people whom we are now calling as culture personality school thinkers, they believed that classical evolutionism provided for something called determined evolution. They were neglecting the possibility of people who might be drifting from the determined route. Everybody has to start here, they will have to end there. At one point there, they seem to be having Beauvoisian influence, also might be because Beauvois was their teacher, one of their teachers. When Beauvois was saying that these fellows were generalizing, they were not trying to study, understand the particular aspect of culture, we see some kind of an influence of that kind in culture personality scholars. I repeat. Sir, the emergence of culture personality school can be traced back to criticism against classical evolution. They believed, that is, culture personality thinkers believed, that classical evolutionism was trying to give what is called a determined future to all the societies in general, meaning that you should move from savagery to civilization, and they did not speak of or neglected the possibility of drifting from the determined route. When it comes to culture personality thinkers, they also borrowed the idea of Beauvois, who gave importance to diversity. They believed that classical evolutionism did not recognize the diversity. True that everybody evolves, but in the process of evolution, the diverse roots of evolution were neglected by them. Now, I am going to give you one other very significant statement here. Psychological school or culture personality school, it believed that classical evolutionists were trying to give this route of evolution with a belief that humans are responding, or humans are what the nature makes them. You will have to understand the statements very closely. Humans, or cultures rather, cultures are what the nature makes them. By nature, they are not talking about the whole lot of environment which we are going to see in neo-evolutionism. In the neo-evolutionism, when he says that environmental determinism, he incorporates political environment, social environment, that environment, this environment, geography, everything included there. But when psychological school is examining classical evolutionism, what they said is, culture is what the nature makes it to be. Meaning that nature, by nature what they might mean is how the major economic subsistence was, how you are exploring the resources were. So based on your skill of exploring the resources and what in general the geography is offering to you, based on that you are having one particular type of living, and you are moving from one type of living to the other. I'm to repeat this again. When psychological school says the classical evolutionists were following this approach, that is, culture is what nature determines you to be. By nature, what they meant is the major economic subsistence and how they were exploiting the resources that are there in the nature. So as your ability to exploit the resources is increasing, your major economic subsistence is changing. That's how things are moving from barbarism to civilization or whatever. So it is basically your progress or your evolution in how you are exploiting the resources in the nature. Are you following what I'm saying? This seems to be a very narrow view according to psychological school. They were questioning things like, is it really something like everybody would exploit in the same way in stage after stage? Because they are, as I said earlier, neglected the possibility of drifting from what is determined. Keeping these things in mind, they are trying to write certain other thoughts. What psychological school, especially there is this lady, the name you have already written, she writes a very beautiful statement which I try reading out to you. I was trying to read out so that I don't make a mistake there. Yeah. No man ever looks at the world, I repeat, no man ever looks at the world with pristine eyes. Maybe for your comfort, you can write it down. No man including women also, no man ever looks at the world with pristine eyes. Pristine, unadulterated, modified, influenced. Pristine is the one that is original, virgin. No man ever looks at the world with pristine eyes. He sees it edited. He sees it edited by a definite set of customs, institutions, and ways of thinking. Such a beautiful narration there. No man sees at things with pristine eyes, but then he sees things with certain influences that are already there. It may be the institutions, it may be the way of thinking. So it's like when I'm looking at this, the way I look at it is different from the way anybody else would look at it. By saying so, she was actually raising curtains for certain discussions. That there is nothing like a psychic unity. They oppose the concept of psychic unity. At a fundamental level, they opposed the psychic unity of different cultures. because every culture might be having its own way of thinking. But if you go deeper into their writings, you'll also look at it that within the same culture, there is a possibility of differential thinking. But when they were writing initially, it was majorly to understand the behavior, the thinking process of people belonging to one particular culture group. Do you agree that by belonging to a particular group, you have a particular style of living? By you belonging to a particular group, do you carry certain traits, certain behavioral traits, cultural traits that are common with the members of your own group? Can you give an example? Can you give an example?
Being South Indians, dietary style is quite common among South
Okay,
Indians.
being South Indians, the dietary style may be common. Hmm? Okay, the way you dress up, the way you wear the clothes may also be something determined by your culture. Or kuch rituals, anything in other kind of the so-called individual behaviors, can we call them? They are there in the rest of the group also. The accent with which one might speak.
Educational choices.
Or the interpretation of words, probably it might be some meaning to some people.
Interpretation of the words. I'm actually not looking at this.
Nationality might be different.
Ji sir?
Nationality might be
Nationality might. Rationality. I don't want to look at very high sounding things. Very simple personality traits, behavioral elements. I'll give you one example that was conducted on as an experiment. Ji sir? You know? I have my own doubts. I think when she says ahimsa for Indians, I think we are one of the most violent people in the world. I'll there give you, thanks for saying that, I'll give you two very beautiful examples there. One, that was a test. Second one was an experience shared by somebody who had come to India. Don't worry much. Somebody was saying, mailing the other day, that बहुत हो रहा है मैम, अभी शुरू ही कहाँ हुआ है. We are only in the beginning of the whole thing. अभी तो चेहरा भी ठीक से नहीं देखा. There's a lot. But don't worry about anything. Just enjoy the process. Unless otherwise you enjoy with a smile on your face. It all you know is like a combination of things that you do. The way you hold your book. We actually teach the young fellows, no? +2 pass किया, graduation में आया, UPSC चिल्ला रहे. What to do? Then one of the first things that we introduce to them is how to hold a newspaper. Holding newspaper is like holding your closest lover. Lovers में भी कोई categories होते हैं ना? He said, yes. The affection that is there between you and the discipline, it actually shows. So कई सारे लोग होते हैं आराम से ना पन्ना पलट रहे, and then that's a very casual way of doing things. And how you will have to actually fold the paper, how you should hold the pen, and how you are actually to underline the things, and how you should look back. Every gesture actually shows the chemistry between you and the newspaper. We'll elaborate this in another topic later, sex and gender kind of things. Don't miss that class. No? Whether you get a question from there or not, you should be there in the class. A cousin of mine was asking this, how do you discuss these things in the class? I said, had I been a male, I would not have been able to discuss. But if a female in an otherwise conservative society is talking about these things, everybody has all ears, especially the male fellows. I was saying something else. There were two things about behavior of people, which we can dub as behavior of culture groups. I am taking you to certain topics such as character studies, national character studies, which is an emerging topic in the international relations. There was one, they picked up an Arab male fellow and an American male fellow, and they left them in a room to converse in an big open hall. For their amusement, what they could see was they started talking on one corner of the hall, and after some time they found them on the other corner of the hall. It's basically because of certain kinds of behaviors. The Arabs generally don't talk in a loud voice. They almost whisper. So when you have to talk to the other fellow, you come down as if yours. And the American fellow, especially if he's a male, he wouldn't want to go close to the other male, so he would be, kya kar rahe ho? You would actually, and this going close and going back, this goes on continuing, and after some time you see them in the, this is a simple thing, but speaks volumes. There is one other experiment, details of which I will be giving you in linguistic anthropology. They tried to look at the sittings and standing postures of people of different culture groups based on the gender. So how is it that the female has to sit, female has to talk, or how is it that the male has to sit and talk? The experiments were so very detailed. One of the experiment was about, suppose you are sitting in an aircraft, next to you being a male, you are sitting next to a female. Who will be sharing the handrest? Who will be sharing the handrest? Maybe that's a cultural thing. The male might say, "Chal mera hai," and then, "Agar tujhe rakhna hai, tu bhi rakh le." Or maybe based on your culture, you may be offering the lady, "Aap le lo," so that the future relation also will continue. Or maybe if you are a socialist, let us share, both of us. So maybe it all depends on your political ideology and economic ideology also. बात तो हो रही है वो छोटा सा वो share करने की, but there are so many things that are related to it. This is one small behavioral thing. There is something else. I had one teacher, couple rather. In my theology lectures, I had two teachers, wife and husband. They were coming here to deliver a lecture in Calcutta, in Chennai. So she was narrating her experience after that. The moment they landed in Chennai, she is actually from somewhere in North America. So she comes here to talk to people. First time when she had come, she says, just because he is there with me, I did not lose myself. Otherwise, I would have been lost. Because we have such a huge humanity living in India. They must not have seen in the dreams also that so many numbers can be living together. You can see so many numbers on the streets. She says once they had come out of the airport, so much of noise of honking, horns of the vehicles, they were actually thinking that something untoward had happened, that so much of buzzing of the horns is happening. It took about 15-20 minutes, she says, for them to understand that actually it is not a chaos, it is actually a concern. It is actually a concern. Way back in their own place, honking horn is infringement of somebody's fundamental right or a human right. But here in this case, she was saying that I started observing that behind the vehicles it is written, blow the horn. And when you are blowing the horn, when you are trying to overtake, because there is no one set pattern from which side you will have to overtake. You can go that side, you can go that side or that side. No, it all depends on you from where you would want to. So she was finding that it is actually the convenience and concern that you are communicating to the fellow who is driving in front of you, that see, I am coming, please be aware. This shows a large cultural diversity. I'll give you one other example of my own self. A cousin of mine, he went to visit his friend in Coorg, the very deep village there. So when he had gone there, friend was not there. General idea is that especially when you come from a conservative Muslim family, you don't even expect the females of the house to come out and talk. But his sister, friend's sister comes. Expectation is that serving water, pani piyoge. Water was not offered, but the moment the lady said that no, he's not around, you can be seated. After that, she had actually brought a bottle of brandy and offered. Lena hai. Then this man, otherwise he would have enjoyed. That too when a female is offering, he would have really enjoyed. But then the situation was not that. One was, it's a friend's house, she's friend's sister. You cannot have an indecent proposal. And second thing is, he was of course in a shock. He aisa bhi hota hai. No? You try to have sips of it in a secrecy so that the rest of the lineage wouldn't know. But then something that is happening not simply openly in the house, a female coming and offering you. So he was taken aback. Then she said, no, no. And the lady said, okay, your wish. And she started pouring her own self, and she started. And this was something that occurs as a big shock. After some time, the friend comes and akele mein le jata hai kamre mein, and then kya yaar, teri sister to aisi hai. You don't regulate your women at home. And then he was explaining, no, this is what is our culture, the kind of climate that we live in, and then the kind of season that we are into. This is an accepted thing. These seem to be very small gestures, small things, but they actually communicate to us the cultural diversity. Now we go back to the same sentence that she had written, Ruth Benedict. No man looks at the things with the pristine eyes. Whenever one observes at things, there is a baggage. There's a baggage of a lot of cultural things there. Your institutions, you're brought up and things like that. Everything gives you a different kind of presentation of the same element that you are observing. What Culture Personality School recognized was that though you are being brought up in the same culture, sir, when I'm giving all these statements, I'm not distinguishing who is saying. I'm trying to pick up things that are there in this school. But some people must have supported one way of analyzing culture and personality. Some people did not support that. I'm trying to put across to you some general things that look to be interesting. And these are the things that came up as a criticism against classical evolutionism. Some of the culture personality thinkers, they believed that even if different people are brought up in the same culture, same environment, same everything, every individual learns different things. Every individual learns the things in a different way. Every individual learns different things, and every individual learns things in a different way. That may be the reason why, even if all your siblings, you're all brought up together, you see that the thinking of one person is very different from your thinking. One may be a police inspector, the other may be a don. But the thing is, you are brought up in the same household. They started to inquire, what is happening here? That though the same cultural background is there, the two different individuals are having different things they are picking up. So it's like the mental editing is happening. In general conversations, we see this word, selective listening. Selective listening. All of you might be listening to the same stuff, but you have a selection process, selective listening. Some of you are very careful when I am saying that tomorrow there is a test. Some of you are intentionally not attentive there, as if nothing has been said to you. This is what we call selective listening. Whatever we would want to listen, we would. Whatever we would want to hear, we hear that. Similarly, whatever we want to see, we see. People from psychology must have come across this, something called Gestalt psychology. I'll see if at all I can show you a picture of that. A very popular picture. There will be many more when I go to Levi Strauss. I'll bring to you several other pictures. What's happening? दिख रहा है? What's happening? Some activity in the park, morning or evening? Direction is not there, so morning or evening. May not be in the midnight, definitely, sorry, or mid in the afternoon. I don't think it's a mid-afternoon or midnight, definitely early in the morning or evening. What else is happening in the park? Is it a leisure time? Maybe people are relaxing, or is it a party going on? No. Sir, ladies? All the ladies are with umbrella. So maybe they belong to one particular culture group. You can see the dressing pattern also. It looks to be very much Victorian. But is there something that is odd in the whole thing? Something like us, somebody like us. Everybody is so very well dressed. One of them is like a UPSC fellow. We don't have time to wear clothes totally. Sometimes we forget. ये कुर्ते पजामे वाला बिजनेस बहुत ही डेंजरस है. आई मीन कुर्ता पजामा पहनो फिर ऊपर से दुपट्टा डालो. मेनी टाइम्स आई फॉरगेट. आधी दूर आ गए फिर चलो दुपट्टा भूल गया. एंड देन आई थॉट ओके इसको भूल ही जाओ तो बेहतर है. एवरी टाइम यू विल हैव टू मेक इट अ पॉइंट दैट अच्छा उसको दुपट्टा उठाओ काइंड ऑफ अ थिंग. हाफ द थिंग्स वी फॉरगेट इन यूपीएससी. एनीथिंग एल्स? Male or female? Both. Maximum. Anybody who is not covering? अच्छा ठीक है ये वाले. और बताइए और कुछ something that is very odd, if at all you could, I mean at least the front couple of rows if you could. There's a dog and monkey. Monkey is something very odd. See, evening hai, morning hai, you are going for a walk, taking your pet for a stroll. But monkey as a pet, that's a rarity actually, that's an odd man out. Monkey kidhar hai? Yeah, here. I mean picture is not so very, but I will share this picture on in your mailbox. Why I am trying to show this picture is this is a popular one in when people start explaining things like a popular way of explaining pictures in Gestalt psychology. When you are looking at a bigger picture, smaller differences go unnoticed. You are actually considering the bigger thing. You fail to notice unless otherwise you get into the details of it. Or when you're looking at a painting, you are actually ignoring that there are so many colors that are used. A stroke there is very much different from the neighboring stroke. A color there is very much different from the neighboring one. But you're not trying to look at the differences there. You're trying to look at the big picture that is emerging from the differences there. Are you following? So here what happens is, many times even the scholars, they comfortably unnotice the differences in the actually existing differences. And this is what Culture Personality School was criticizing about classical evolution. Classical evolutionists were ignoring the very obvious. They were selectively looking at things so that they can generate a theory that can be called a generalized version. Now, we are talking about emergence of Culture Personality School. We said that there are two triggering points. One, they were not ready to accept the determined future. Second thing is, they were not really ready to take the generalizations because the cultural evolutionists, they neglected the differences therein, not simply at the cultural level but at the individual level also. They believed that cultures are what the nature gives to them. Now, taking it further from there, they were also influenced by Bowers, who said that, see, you will have to respect the uniqueness. Three people here. One is Benedict, the other is Margaret Mead, the third one is Gardiner. They came up with one significant way of linking cultures and personalities. Those are the three very popular themes. The three popular themes there, one is called individual personalities result in specific cultures. Cultures influence personalities. Culture and personality influence each other. I have written one more name here, Cora Dubo. That is the other lady. Personality influences culture. Culture influences personality. Culture and personality influence each other. I was saying in the beginning that there was a requirement in USA for such kind of studies. See, when British were in the need of certain studies, they were sponsoring the culturologists. Even in this context, there was a need. If you could recall, in the earliest session, I had shown you certain pictures where a Japanese lady and the Japanese soldiers were shown. Do you remember? There was one picture where I tried to show a Japanese lady and Japanese man who were wearing those armed forces uniforms, and we were trying to say at that time that, see, there is an elegance on the one hand, there is a violent behavior on the other. So it's like two opposite ends. I think on the class that I was holding on 20th, for some of you, 20th of June. In that class, I tried to show this picture of a female and several males from the Japanese society, where we see the elegance and a very violent behavior there. That is the kind of diversity these people were actually trying to study. So American government was in the need of knowing how is it that the Japanese soldiers are so very brutal in the war. I repeat, there is an academic interest, not happy with classical evolution or whatever that was happening. We wanted to have something unique for ourselves. We were giving Culture Personality School. Of course, certain people question whether it's a full-fledged school or not, or maybe some kind of a different way of looking at things. So if you are calling somebody some thought process as a school, it's a big thing. Certain Europeans oppose naturally. You're not an American, so you'd oppose. Academics is only a political game. The second thing is, apart from an academic thing, there is a political requirement also. Government wanted to know its enemy. We are coming to the same statement. Anthropology helps understand the others. The others may be your friends, your enemies. It is more important to understand your enemies than your friends. Friends you can never understand, but enemies you will understand. And the other day when a student was saying, I'm feeling very bad that my friend is scoring better than me. And the next day he calls up and says, I'm happy today. We have checked our scores. I think my friends will not make it. We can't understand whether you are a friend or something else. Enemy, you understand that you wish ill for your enemy. But being a friend, if you are doing this, maybe this is altogether different human psychology. So the second thing is, American government wanted to know specific things about the Japanese society. They started to sponsor. Margaret Mead was one of them who was selected by the government, who was sponsored by the government to conduct a set of studies on Japanese society. There, they came up with writing a book, Culture, Personality, Thinkers, co-authored by Ruth Benedict and Margaret Mead. They wrote a book something like The Chrysanthemum and the Sword. Chrysanthemum, the national flower of Japanese. The nomenclature itself looks to be very, very odd there. It doesn't gel well. How can a sword and something like a flower go together? But that's what was portrayed in that picture that day. Now, you first watch this small thing, then we will start reflecting on. You will note down one work to be done at home. This is a bigger video of 52 minutes, a full-fledged movie actually, called Coming of Age in Samoa. This is a movie you will watch at home. Coming of Age in Samoa. Coming of Age in Samoa. A smaller one we are seeing here.
Major funding for Odyssey was provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities. Additional funding was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Polaroid Corporation.
Please come to order. Today we have as a special treat a guest speaker, Margaret Mead. She is a pioneer in the field work of anthropology. She is a curator emeritus of the American Museum of Natural History. She has many publications, among one of her most famous, The Coming of Age in Samoa. Margaret Mead is a Renaissance woman, a pioneering anthropologist, a writer, a humanist, a woman of brilliance, wit, and infinite knowledge, and we are indeed honored to have this great woman with us today, Margaret Mead.
When Margaret had her mind made up, she could move mountains.
I'm not talking about an angel, I'm talking about a person.
I thought, well, if she could do it in New Guinea, I can certainly do it here.
Now, some societies decide all men are to be like lions and all women are to be like rabbits. When they do that, the lionesses don't do very well.
Now, what Margaret did, I would say, was to begin the sexual revolution.
I think Margaret was the grandmother of the women's movement.
Margaret was a woman before she was anything else, and she was a mother, and the family, and ultimately youth, were her major concerns. This is where society is built.
Now, at this moment in history, the United States is the richest and strongest country in the world. It is the country that is endangering the world most, and it's the country that has the greatest chance to save the world.
When Margaret Mead died in 1978, she had spent the first part of her life attempting to save remote tribal cultures from an encroaching modern world, and the second part attempting to save the modern world from itself. She crossed boundaries of time, place, and culture, and returned from her fieldwork with lessons about our own possibilities. What was her mission? What was her method? What was the message she shared with us? She began her journey in 1901 in Philadelphia. Her family moved to a farm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, when Margaret was 10. She was the eldest child of Edward Sherwood Mead, a university teacher and businessman, and of Emily Fogg Mead.
My mother was a sociologist who made the first study of Italian immigrants in this country. My grandmother, my father's mother, who lived with us, had been a school teacher, but with very little education, which was true in those days. And then when my grandfather came home from the Civil War, he took his bonus and they both went to college together and graduated together. So that the two women who were closest to me had obviously married, had children, and had professional careers. So that it never occurred to me that women shouldn't have brains. It never occurred to me that you didn't use them, or that you didn't make some selection of a career that you wanted that was more than just being married and having children.
Following a family tradition, Margaret's mother filled 17 notebooks with observations about Margaret and her brother Richard. Very early, Margaret learned from her grandmother to note the differences between her sisters Elizabeth and Priscilla. Although her family were not churchgoers, Margaret found what would be a lifelong faith when she decided at 11 to be baptized at the Buckingham Episcopal Church.
I started thinking about what I might do when I was, I suppose, about 10 or 11. One point I wanted to be a nun. Another point I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a minister's wife and run a small country parish. At the same time, I had 6 children.
When she was 16, Margaret met Luther Cressman, who was bound for the ministry.
I remember we were skating on the French Creek, and she and I skated together for a long, long time, and I told her all about Antigone, which we just read in Greek, and they recited the whole sorry tragedy to her. She had with her this other girl, a close friend, who was a great source of laughter herself, always having fun, you know, and she was a good foil for Margaret. Margaret was a much more serious person.
Luther did his army service and began studies for the ministry, and Margaret went to college, first at DePauw and then at Barnard College in New York City. A 5-year engagement led to marriage in September of 1923 at the church in Buckingham.
I think Margaret had a very real, genuine interest at the time. She expressed that she wanted to be the wife of a parish priest and mother of 6 children. And I think that her loss of interest in that, when she ran into anthropology, indicates while it was something she was genuinely interested in, it was more or less fantasy.
Margaret first studied English and then psychology, but she found her calling when she took a course with Franz Boas, the father of American anthropology. Boas's urgent concern was to send students out to observe and record those cultures that were vanishing through contact with Western religion and technology. He was skeptical of general theories about behavior and believed that the only way to understand human diversity was through detailed documentation of people living in different times, places, and social circumstances. His student Ruth Benedict was interested in the way people grew up to reflect the variations in their cultures. Together, Boas and Benedict influenced Margaret profoundly.
I had already started virtually a master's essay in psychology. And I remember having lunch with Ruth, and she said, well, Professor Boas and I have nothing to offer except the most important work that needs to be done.
Margaret had prepared herself for field work in Polynesia, but Boas was afraid to let her go off alone to a remote island and suggested she study an American Indian group. They compromised.
I went to Samoa because my professor said that I had to go somewhere where there was a boat every 3 weeks. So Samoa had a boat every 3 weeks, so that's where I went.
She had never been west of Indiana. By train and steamer, she traveled 6 weeks and 8,000 miles and landed in Samoa on August 11, 1925. She was 23 years old. With her, Margaret brought a typewriter, a junior Kodak camera, pencils, and paper.
Samoa was the perfect island for the problem that I was going to study.
The problem was whether a turbulent adolescence was a universal biological fact, as Hall and Freud said at the time, or whether it was variable, so that children growing up in other cultures might experience a calmer adolescence. While learning the language and recording the environment in which the children developed, Mead observed, interviewed, and tested 68 girls aged 9 to 20 in 3 neighboring villages. She discovered a very different kind of adolescence among the girls of Samoa. They experimented with sex. They were not pushed to achieve or to make adult choices. Extended families cushioned any strain between the child and her parents.
And I could have gone to other islands where adolescence would have looked much like our own. I could have done just as good work, but it wouldn't have interested anybody. It would just have reconfirmed their prejudices.
When she returned, Mead was hired by the American Museum of Natural History in New York City.
And this office has been my most permanent home since 1926, when I came back from Samoa. But I discovered very quickly that this was a very good place to stay. There are 2 stairways. If you don't want to see somebody who's coming up one, you can go down the other. Nobody comes up unless they really want to see you. They don't wander in and out saying, did you see this in the morning paper?
The New York Times, November 4th, 1928. As Miss Mead's careful scientific work deserves the most earnest tribute, so her method of presenting its results calls for the highest praise.
When I wrote my first book, Coming of Age in Samoa, it was about adolescence. And I thought that the people who were interested in adolescence were primarily teachers, and then to some extent physicians also. And they didn't speak Samoan, and they didn't speak technical anthropological language, and so I wrote it in English.
Mead's book broke 2 unwritten rules. She wrote in a popular style, and she suggested applications for the West, ways that American parents and teachers might reduce the tensions of growing up. Despite her more conventional academic publications, many of her colleagues were displeased. 30 years later, another curator at the museum would face the same problem.
I'd been at the museum about a year when I finished my first book, which was on the forest people in Mbuti. It was written for the public rather than for the academics. Margaret was asked to write something about it. She was very enthusiastic. And she warned me about the dangers of writing a book that was likely to be successful in any way. That if the book made money, people would be jealous. That if it gained any kind of fame or notoriety, people would be jealous. And that it could adversely affect a career and could lead to a great deal of unpopularity amongst one's colleagues.
Margaret and Luther had each changed direction, and childless, they were divorced in 1927.
Margaret's dissatisfaction was not with me. It was with marriage. Margaret, I don't think, could make the kind of commitment that was necessary for prolonged, lasting, successful marriage. Her first commitment was through her profession, her work. I've always said she was programmed for greatness from the very beginning, at least distinction, and I think she carried it out, quite frankly. She played to that tune.
Luther left the ministry and went on to a second 50-year marriage and a distinguished career studying and teaching the archaeology of the Northwest.
You would find some information about her next marriages. She had series of marriages, and what I found very interesting is somewhere later you will see one of her ex-husbands talking about her. Generally, if it is between husband and wife, especially the divorced couple, it's a rarity to see positive things being said about the ex-partner. Forget about ex-partner, about partner itself. But here you will see a remarkable respect that one of the ex-husbands had for her. And when he says how committed she was to the discipline. Though in the beginning you had seen she herself saying that at one point of time she wanted to be a lawyer, at the other point of time she wanted to marry a minister and give birth to 6 children. Having that kind of an orientation in the beginning, later maybe she was experimenting her life with different partners. And at one point of time, he was saying that she would lose interest very fast in things. Maybe the same thing was happening with the husband also. See, the kind of society where we live in, we cannot have this luxury to say that, see, now it's okay, let us part off and we'll start a new one with new person. I mean, it looks to be something very unusual in our society. But where she lived, maybe that is an acceptable one. Of course, today, in today's times, even in our own society, we see that people are getting into marriages, multiple marriages, one after the other. But you can see the kind of respect or disrespect they receive from the rest of the community. You can see that the number of people attending such marriages, one after the other, if you are going on giving wedding cards, is saal diya, next saal diya, next saal bhi diya. The number of people attending your marriage is actually coming down. Finally, you two alone are there. That actually tells you the cultural dimension. Now, I'll take you back to those 3 situations and we'll try to... Don't miss this movie, sir. Coming of age in Samoa. This is about adolescence. I'm sure you'll be interested in. Yeah, those are the things we started with. Personality influences culture. Culture influences personality. I'll show you one picture. That is the lady. I mean, thoda light ka problem hai. But if you could see some of her pictures, more than anthropology, her beauty strikes us. Maybe that is one of the driving forces where people were looking into her books. Basic human psyche, we can't help it. That is the name. I'll switch off the light for you. The Chrysanthemum and the Sword, the Patterns of Japanese Culture. That was written by Benedict, co-authored There are 3 ladies in the school. I don't know why the magical number 3 there. Each of them studied 3 societies. Don't know why they were interested in number 3. It may be an accident. Though they were visiting, especially if Ruth Benedict is there, she was visiting at least 6-7 different societies. But she was basing her work, she was bringing out, condensing her work into number 3. I am trying to give you the gist of their thinking. Benedict said that individual personalities make up culture. It can be examined in 2 ways. Individual personalities make up culture. It can be looked at from 2 perspectives. One is that maybe an individual with such an impounding personality might influence the culture, or maybe the individual might be instrumental in bringing a particular nature to that culture group. Somebody was talking about ahimsa. If I consider that one of the basic characteristics of Indian population, Indian culture, if it is ahimsa. Now, I am not going into the historical evidences to prove, etc. Because the moment we say ahimsa, we remember the old man. So we may say that, okay, because Mahatma had that kind of an impounding personality influencing the so-called nation. Maybe because of him, India was dubbed as a place for non-violence or a culture of non-violence. This can be seen as one example, one way of looking at things. When Benedict says, personalities influence culture, it may be an individual influencing the whole thing. Or maybe Martin Luther King was instrumental in bringing certain kinds of ideologies in that society. The second thing is, this is mostly found in her writings, like how we were talking about Elvin Hatch analyzing functionalism of Malinowski. The second one is mostly followed by her. According to her, when several individuals in a group have certain similarities in their traits, these traits would become the personality of the culture group. I repeat. Sir, in many of her writings, if you go deep and read Ruth Benedict, at some places she seems to be confused. Instead of writing from one direction, she seemed to be writing from the other direction. But we will have to get a clarity to write in the exam. She says that in a culture group, when the members therein seem to be having certain culture traits dominantly. So when a large number of individuals are having, if I am calling them culture traits, each of them are having certain culture traits that seem to be similar to many of the others. These individual culture traits are actually, when magnified, they become the culture of that group. So first exercise is, when you are going to a culture group, she would have to find out what is that trait that is predominantly there in all of them. This predominant culture trait becomes the characteristic of that culture group. Meaning that if I am loosely arranging this in a couple of sentences, how individuals in a culture group behave, or how they are actually taking certain decisions, that influences the culture, that makes the culture. Many times you must have heard what you are is actually a reflection of culture. This is the opposite of it. What your culture is the reflection of individuals. What your culture is the reflection of individuals. For example, when you are traveling to distant lands, people in that region do not know what India or Indian is. You are actually a representative there. Based on an analysis of how you are behaving, that culture group will form an opinion about your culture group. That is the reason why so much of advertisement by Amir Khan, when he says that behave when a guest comes, because these are the people who are going to take the idea of what India is to the rest of the world. Now, did you understand? There are two ways when she says that individuals influence the culture. It may be a single individual molding the entire culture. Secondly, several individuals, when they are having a commonality in the culture traits, that becomes the body physic of the culture group. So the first exercise she would go in to do is identifying what are the major traits that are found in most of the people, and that would reflect as the culture of that group at large. Keeping all this discussion aside, a personal question to you. What do you think is the set of characteristics when I say Indian? Unity in diversity. India is a diverse one. Okay. If I am talking about India, I may be asking you about the behavioral traits of the individuals. I repeat my question. When I say what is Indian culture or what is the meaning of Indian, what I am seeking from you is, what are the behavioral traits of the individuals that can be dubbed as Indian behavior or Indian culture? Cordial, okay, cordial or conservative, all C's there. Cordial, conservative, or ये तो बड़ा ही सवाल हो गया. Okay, respecting elders and
sometimes superstitious.
Sometimes not respected. Sometimes superstitious. Okay. Sometimes superstitious and
emotional,
sentimental, sentimental, whatever. और बताइए. Not being punctual. Great. I was looking for this. Not being punctual, because I had to talk about this in today's class. Or organizing chaos or organized chaos. Okay. Don't know, God knows how we wade through the traffic. We have our own ways of getting out of it. Scared of what? Scared of asking questions. To whom? Generally. Not to the teacher, no? Because teacher is a very burdensome word. Teacher is a very burdensome description. When somebody says that you teach anthropology, I am actually taken aback. Because teacher is a big role to play. Somebody said something? Accommodating?
Others, like we gel well with.
We gel well with others. Okay.
Good at jugaad.
Good at jugaad. I am actually in love with that. Being punctual. There was one experiment done, nationality wise. This was an experiment done in Israel. Is it that you are always not punctual, or sometimes you are? Depends on where we are going. You go to a marriage on time? No, definitely not on time. Especially marriages in Hyderabad. Especially if they are Muslim marriages. Never go on time. When you go there, if at all you go there on the time that is scheduled, not even the sweeper had arrived there. Forget about having a quick dinner and going back. No. What else? It depends on. Maybe to whom, whom are you going to meet? If it is she, you would actually go in advance, maybe 2 hours in advance. Maybe you take the lutf of waiting for her. It has its own pleasure of waiting for her. Or maybe it is an exam, anthropology slip test. Your watch actually goes late by about 3 hours. Suddenly you realize that, okay, there was an exam. The Israeli situation, this is some examples I am giving. If you are a salesman, suppose an Indian salesman is there, you have an appointment. Do you stick to the appointment? In what circumstances you stick to the appointment? Only if it is an important customer you go on time, otherwise you will make him wait if it is an Indian. Anything else? If you are going to get more money, maybe you are on time. So, Israeli salespersons, if was found that if you are really skillful, if you have a product with you, if you are really skillful and the other person is bound to buy, you would go late. I think it is against what I am saying. What you were saying. You know pretty well that she is in need of you, and you have the skill, you have the product that is necessary for the other fellow, then you shouldn't go on time. If you are going on time, it means that you are more than anxious, and hence you are trying to present yourself more than necessarily on time. Management of time and management of space, these are the things that are the subject of study in contemporary cultural studies. We are going to see one other beautiful presentation later on how office space is actually organized based on nationality, whether you are sitting close to your boss or you are actually at a very far off distance from your boss. This is also something to do. For example, if I am sticking to the Japanese thing alone, we know that they have a constraint of space and so many people out there. The houses are small and then office spaces are small. They actually, boss and the person, the employees, they share the same table. It's like, whenever you want, you can touch your employee. Coming here, Benedict was of the idea that culture is a representative of so many societies she had actually studied. Culture is a representative of the individuals. Maybe for your own comfort of spelling, you may make a note of them. Her field studies there. Some of the Red Indians population, Serrano Indians, Pueblo Zuni, Cochiti Indians. So 3 Indian societies are there. Serrano Indians, Cochiti Indians, Kwakitul, I know you remember him, you remember them? Yes. Kwakitul, and then Dobuans of Melanesia. Her idea was individuals' traits put together makes the culture. Individuals' traits put together makes the culture. This was the view of Ruth Benedict. She was of the opinion that when you are observing people, when you are looking at things, you actually have a mental editing made. You would look at the things from your own cultural background. That's how it was. When the lady was serving alcohol, the kind of response the man got, because he was looking at the whole incident from his own cultural background. She was of the opinion that individuals put together make a culture. Based on that, she had come up with a concept called special geniuses. I'm reading out what is there. Individual personalities make culture due to similarities in them. You finish writing, then I will talk. You may not be able to understand what I have written there, but you simply take it down, we will talk about them. What I have written there: special geniuses, Apollonian, Dionysian. There are certain Apollonian characters, some example was given, Dionysian characters, an example was given. I know you don't understand a word there, but how many things we must be writing without understanding? You first finish writing, then we will talk. Somewhere from 22nd of this month, you will be starting to take your tests, full-fledged tests. I will give you the schedule. Should I read out? What I have written there: individual personalities make a culture due to similarities, and those similarities are organized in two groups. Each group is called a special genius. One is called the Apollonian special genius, the other is Dionysian. Apollonian stands for certain characteristics: peace-loving, discipline, kindness, and cooperation. Example she gave was Zuni society. And the other special genius she mentioned was Dionysian, that stands for alcoholism, luxurious living, etc., etc. The example she gave was Dobuan society and Kwakitul. Now we'll try to discover what she meant by all that. I should keep on reminding you what her basic theme is. She is trying to find out what are the major similar personality traits individuals were having. Once she comes to a conclusion that these are the similar culture traits people have, she would categorize the entire culture as one particular type. That's the reason why I was asking here. When we say Indian culture, most of the individuals belonging to this culture group might be having certain culture traits that are similar. So when you say that you stand for laziness, most of Indians may be. When you suppose you say that hardworking, maybe. Hardworking not in India, outside, maybe. Or kind of things. I have to tell you this. I was surprised at something that had happened yesterday back home. I told you I have a little fellow. So he said that I will come on a cycle or scooter. You stop me, you are a policeman. I said, fine, I'll stop you. Then I was actually surprised where from he had learned this. When I had stopped him, he said, you ask for papers. Then I said, give papers. Then he said that I don't have papers, I have money. Then I was actually shocked. I mean, somebody at about 3.5, 4, when he's saying that a policeman stops, you should give money, then I was really shocked. Then he said second time, I don't have money. Then I said, what should I do? You put me in the dark room. I don't know what is being taught or where he is picking up such kind of things. Now, with due respect to all the police fellows, but something that a child had got in his mind. Later we were to say that no, it is not like that. No, this is not happening. This is what it is. Because somewhere things I think are going wrong, and this kind of a mental picture is emerging. So we will have to see what are the characteristics that we are actually holding as a group, because we are actually going to influence the whole lot of the future generations, and it's not simply that we are going to communicate to the rest of the world that see, we stand for this. Many times what we are not is actually portrayed as what we are by the outsiders. Maybe that is also a selective looking at us. Now, in a way, when she is giving these names, she was using those names of Apollonian and Dionysian. She was influenced by Greek and Roman way of writing things. What she is trying to do is, in a particular population, say Zuni, she says, they have something called an Apollonian special genius. What she means by special genius is a set of characteristics that a culture group holds in most of the people. You have to remember here, this particular school is known for trying to give very interesting vocabulary that seems to be very exotic. People may be puzzled, or maybe they would be interested in reading what is this Apollonian. What she is doing is trying to say that in a population there are people mostly having this kind of characteristics. And interestingly, when she is giving one example, if you go into the details there, she says that they have an Apollonian special genius. What she meant by Apollonian genius is the characteristics of this Apollo god or the sun god. So nobody can be more disciplined than him. Nobody can be more loving and caring than him. But then one problem is that she is not noticing that there can be other characteristics also, other opposite characteristics in that group itself. It's not that the entire culture group can be dubbed as very good and the entire one is dubbed as very bad. So she's only thinking in ones and zeros, black and white, plus and minus. There can be variants also. Many times, when a question is asked, we cannot give an answer in black and white. She might be asking you, say yes or no. Whether you did this or not, yes or no. You try to explain to her, no, I don't want explanation. You say yes or no, did you do it or not? You are forced to say yes or no, because she is not ready to listen. You are actually trying to explain to her that every time, all the time, it is not possible to do things in complete black or complete white. Sometimes we will have to do things via media. But she can't understand. She can't understand. One thing is she is not ready to understand. Second thing, she can't understand also. Because that is she. We'll go a little further there. The second one here. Whatever society example she is giving, that's all factual thing that you will anyway have to remember. She says that the whole lot of population there is Dionysius. These are the people who are alcoholic and all kinds of negative characteristics. No culture group is totally bad. And the worst of the culture groups also, there are certain positive things. When I'm saying all this, we have totally forgotten Boas. When we are saying all this, we have totally forgotten Boas. We started judging people, labeling people. So we see that the culture personality school has started to go back in time from the established notions of Boas. What the teacher had taught was very much different from what she was doing. And she is also saying that people learn things, different things, and the same things in a different way. She is a proof of that. When Malinowski was learning from Bowes, he had learned different things in different ways. She had learned things in a different way. So she did not notice, or she was ignorant of, diversities in culture traits within the same culture. Did you understand, sir? But then we still generally, if at all we see contemporary anthropology, psychological anthropology, we believe that yes, individuals influence culture, individual personalities influence culture if they are impounding, number one, or a group at large is trying to catch up newer cultural traits, they would be instrumental in molding the entire culture over a period of time. That we accept, but this seems to be very narrow kind of things. This is not it. She gives an elaboration. So a much more detailed description there. What is meant by Zuni is the Zuni population has rituals, different kinds of them. Rituals for the, bear in mind, Apollonian culture trait stands for all positive characteristics. This is an elaborated list of positive characteristics. She is trying to bring certain cultural practices also, like marriage being very simple. You finish writing, then I'll talk. You won't listen to me before that. I'll wait for you. She looks to be a diffusionist type in the sense that we accept diffusion even today, but the kind of theories they gave in diffusionism we don't accept. When individuals influence culture, we accept, but how you are identifying the individual culture traits, there is a mistake there. In every culture there is a diversity of traits that she doesn't notice. Forget about the entire culture group. We were saying that within the same family, there can be difference in the behavior. I'll read out for you people. Where are you? Second group. Dobu, they stand for Dionysian special genius. The traits are conflict, competition, combat, violence, magical practices to harm others. Everyone fears and hates the other. They are generally deceivers. They hardly keep up their promises. Deceiver ante ade kada. They hardly keep up their promises. Kwakital society, Kwakital, number 3 there. They do not believe in religion. They are thorough materialists, and they rarely share benefits with others. The problem is, she fails to understand that in every culture group these combinations might be there. The way, the reason for she making such kind of conclusions is not simply Ruth Benedict, but the whole lot of culture personality school, they depended on samples. They depended on samples, and whatever information the sample was giving, they were trying to put it in their ethnograph. See, we had seen how Malinowski was using the informers. He was using informers. He also believed that there has to be a realistic ethnograph writing. What is true from the perspective of culture group, you will have to write. Are you with me? Are you with me? But when it comes to Ruth Benedict or anybody from this particular school, They depended on, you must have listened to the documentary when Margaret Mead was studying the Samoan society. Some 60 odd adolescent girls were chosen and information was elicited from them. Remember, sir, when you are depending on some informers, if you are a Malinowski, you would try to get a cross-check from different places within the same culture. You would not totally rely on one or a few informers. You would try to do a cross-check. Then you would write the ethnograph. This is actually a science, an art, where you are, how you choose an informer and how you try to cross-check. But in this particular case, there is a total dependence, total reliance on the sample that they were choosing. And interestingly, these samples knew pretty well that whatever they were going to tell, that is going to be a portrayal of themselves in the world. Because this lady who is writing would take the information as given, and she is going to write in the book. So many times what is not right also was coming out. On the other hand, the way she was trying to conclude also, when somebody like, a Dobuan society about whom she was writing, it is the way she was conceiving from the information that she was getting. And altogether one-sided information. Maybe she was carrying some kind of a stereotype in mind. She was trying to get information as such. It's like, suppose I want to prove that one culture group stands for being miserly. I would try to get all kinds of inputs, all kinds of informations to prove that they are miserly group. I think the job was more or less like that. But interesting. Suppose we accept as given, without questioning, without arguing. One particular group, she says, is very peace-loving. They don't have competition. They share resources. They keep festivities to the minimum. They live mostly in groups. They share things in group. One evidence she gives is not even leadership is accepted by an individual. Leaders there are in groups. There is a council of leaders. She writes elsewhere, even the religious functionaries work in groups. So you want a ceremony to be done, the priest won't come all alone. There's a group of priests there. It's an employment for the whole lot of people. On the other hand, you have the Obuans. All negative characteristics. They stand for combat. They stand for competition. They stand for conflict. And hence there is magic. Magic is generally a phenomena when you don't trust the other fellow. Because magic, we dub it as a negative trait. Magic is a secretive affair, unlike religious priests that are there in the Zuni. And you have the other fellow, Kwakitals. The kind of characteristics that she has written are very much opposite to what Bowers was writing. The problem is sampling errors. You have to see to it that your sample has to give a proper idea. But then she is known for this study of Japanese societies. Here there is a confusion. Her writing goes to the opposite side. That what they are is because of what has happened in the childhood. So she starts with one premise. She concludes at the other premise. When she says that why the Japanese soldiers are behaving in a particular way, it is because of what has happened in the childhood, meaning that she is saying that individual is the result of culture. Are you following what I say? The kind of examples they have given, the kind of working from the sample, that had been erroneous. That's the problem there. But they are good storytellers, so I'll give you some stories. What they are is because of the upbringing. There are a couple of stories, whether they are cooked stories or the reality, You can judge based on the stories there. It is in this particular context, Mead and Ruth Benedict coincide. Mead was of the idea that individual is the result of culture. Individual is the result of culture. How many times you must have faced this in your life? Looking at you, people say what kind of upbringing you are from. Your behavior is the indication of your upbringing. How many times your parents must have told you that don't put them to shame by behaving in particular ways. That is the reason why, being a child, whenever you were taken outside on a visit to somebody's house, your mother endlessly was giving you a speech throughout the journey. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. So many lessons being taught in that journey. Very difficult to memorize. Because the fear is, the way you behave will be a statement about the upbringing. Now, I am giving you two things from the Japanese society. The question was, American government was actually trying to understand how and why the Japanese soldiers are so very ruthless in war, as if the American soldiers were very kind in war. If it is war, yes, it is war. If it is love, yes, it is love. There cannot be violent love and a peaceful war. Of course, there could be certain loves that could be very violent also. That's the other extreme. We are not getting into those stories. We are mostly worried about war now. Because see, generally when we say Japanese culture, so many things come to our mind, such as, when we say Japanese culture, what comes to our mind? Samurai, workaholics, girls, no, walking like this. The dress is such that they can't even stretch their feet. See how I can stretch my feet. They can't, no. Very difficult. But the kind of intricate detail to which they work looks so very peaceful. And maybe for some people, when I say Japanese, maybe sushi only. For the foodies. For the Americans, soldiers of Japan are a haunting thing. Now here, research methodology, I should come back to that. When the culture personality thinkers, especially Mead and Benedict, when they were working on the Japanese soldiers, Japanese population, they could not go to Japan to get the information. They could get the information from the ethnographs of the Japanese population, or they could have some information from the prisoners of war. They could get information from the articles, newspaper articles that were getting published, or the confiscated diaries of the soldiers. These were actually the basis based on which they were writing stories. The question is, how and why the soldiers were so very brutal in the war. One story says, the answer lies in the toilet practices. The answer lies in toilet practices. The story goes like this. The Japanese children, do you remember when you were managing your own toilet things? I mean, at what age, maybe, if you could recall from your memory? At what age you were managing yourself in the toilet? Going by yourself, washing by yourself, getting dressed by yourself? Anything that you could recall? Or maybe somebody you must have seen in your household. Some of the married fellows having children, you can give us much more authentic information. or anything that you can think of. Maybe this could be the age when a child can take care of himself or herself. What could be the age? This is a syllabus thing, sir. Chapter 10, paper 1. Maybe 4. अभी ये अलग बात है कि कुछ फैमिलीज में 18-20 साल तक भी बिस्तर गीला होता ही है. Before getting him married, you will counsel him, नहीं बेटा, फ्यूचर में ऐसा करना नहीं है. Because I am the mother, I am taking care of all the soiled bedding, but she will not be doing. वरना तुम बाद में भी मेरे साथ ही रहोगे. Maybe in Indian situation, maybe 4, maybe 5, by which time the child gets slightly independent. सोता तो फिर भी आपके साथ ही है. But then in the Japanese society, it's said that by about 1.5 to 2 years of age, the children have to be thoroughly trained in toilet things. So toilet practice and execution should be thoroughly be done by 1.5 to 2 years of age, which looks to be a very early age. Actually, in India, children grow very slowly. Chronological age they get. But when it comes to taking care of themselves, it takes a long time, thanks to UPSC also. I was thinking that maybe the maximum age for UPSC exam would be reduced. 28 से 26 हो, that was what I was looking for. 30 हुआ, 32 हुआ. And if it goes on increasing, when by the time you are entering service, you have already touched your senescence. At the most maybe 10 साल का हो आपका service. And UPSC says that we believe in selecting the youthful fellows. So the definition of youth has to be more changed from time to time. It is not the Sardarji's statement that I am a 70-year young fellow. Sardarji never says that I am 70 years old. He'll always say I am 70 years young fellow. Maybe we are following the same here. But when we go to Japanese society, now what she says is, there is so much of psychological pressure when you are regulating the child with the toilet practices. He is not allowed to relieve himself whenever and wherever he wanted. अभी Indian houses तो and roads also, irrespective of your age, you can relieve wherever, whenever you want. There is no difference between a buffalo that is the free culture of India. The freedom that you give. Meaning of freedom is this for us. For a Japanese fellow, poor thing, 1.5 years he is locked in the toilet. This is a silver lining. All those controls that you have put on the toilet practice, they get converted into emotional baggage, bottled up, bursting yourself in the war. And you become so very sadistic, so very ruthless and brutal in the war. This is the reason for the ruthlessness in the war. You can actually back home sit and think. One of my friend, a psychiatrist, he was saying this, that there's a possibility of this. There's a theory there saying that yes, toilet practices have an impact on. Just imagine, आधा घंटा control नहीं होता. 1.5, 2 hours, 2 years fellows, they are supposed to practice the toilet things very early in age. We take that. There is the other story that goes this way. Where before giving the Japanese story, see, every faith, every culture group comes up with its own book of giving us how to take care of, how to raise the children. I am going to the typical Islamic narration, wherein an individual's life is divided into 4 7 years each. The first 7 years, the child has to be treated like a master, like a king, whatever it is. He wants to put his feet on your head, do it. Whatever. The intention is, during the first years of life, the child has to get the complete confidence in the parent, that come what may, my parent is there. For everything, I can depend on my parent. Once that kind of a confidence is built in the first 7 years of time, the next 7 years, he shall be treated like a servant. People may raise an eyebrow that how can a king be suddenly treated as a servant? It all depends on the kind of confidence you are giving in the child, that whatever the parent does is for him. Then he can be treated like absolutely like a servant in the next 7 years. Then once he crosses the 14 years of time, the third 7 years, he should be treated like your soldier. Whenever something happens, he should be able to take care of you. Once this happens, from 21st year onwards, he will be a minister to you, he will be a guide, he will be there for everything for you. You can depend on him. See, the later stages of life actually depend on what has happened in the first 7 years. What you are writing on his mental pictures. Now, this is something that is being said. I mean, more or less the same thing is said in all the culture groups. What happens in the early childhood actually reflects later. Going back to Japan. It is said that, Mead writes, it is said that the early childhood, before adolescence in Japan, actually gives so much of freedom to them. Now, don't compare this story with the toilet story. Two stories are very much different from one another. One given by Benedict, one given by Mead. Mead says, the earliest years before adolescence, the children are given such a high freedom. Whatever they want, they can pursue, they can do things. The moment you enter adolescence, they are subject to the strict rules, and you are supposed to follow certain norms thoroughly, and you cannot deviate from them. So it's like all these years they were very free, and then suddenly they are supposed to follow certain rules. It's like it has a lot of emotional impact. So suddenly all your emotions are actually to be controlled, and God forbid, and you become a soldier, all these emotions that you have been controlling in yourself, you would relieve them in the war. This is one other story that Mead talks about. So what you behave as an adult is actually the result of what has happened in your childhood. Don't question the authenticity of them. When you haven't questioned the authenticity of what culture personality thinkers said, you don't have the luxury now, nor the necessity of questioning the story given by these two ladies. But the purpose is very clear. They wanted to know why they behaved in that particular way. But then, Mead was very clear in her orientation that upbringing plays a key role in molding the characteristic of the children, of the young fellows. It is here she says, when I say molding, child rearing is nothing but culture influencing the personality of the population. Whereas earlier when Ruth Benedict was saying this, we will have to look for the characteristics, we will have to look for the behavioral traits among the people. Most of the people, when they are having a similar lot of things, these are nothing but a reflection in the culture. That looks to be a very theoretical concept. But when it comes to Margaret Mead's concept, she looks to be more practical when she says that what is the individual personality is actually a reflection of the child rearing. It looks to be more realistic. But in these two cases, when Gardiner says, in these two cases, they have neglected the other side of it. One says that it is culture that influences personality. The other says that personality influences culture. These are the half studies according to this man, Gardiner. For him, culture and personality, said that arrow mark should be there between them. Culture and personality influence each other. Meaning that culture influences personality, personality in turn influences culture. So for the entire discussion of 1.5 hours, we bring it to 2 points. One thinker, that is Ruth Benedict, without many practical evidences, had given a theoretical concept of individual culture traits. If they are magnified, they become the characteristic of the culture. The second lady, with good lot of information from the field, she could conclude that the upbringing or culture per se influences individuals' personalities. This is the second side of it. Both of them neglected the other side. And hence Gardiner says that culture and personality influence each other. This he was trying to establish from what is called institutions in a society. We have used this word earlier also in the case of Malinowski's functionalism. Institutions there were understood in a different way. What we said then was that culture comes up with the establishment of institutions to fulfill individuals' needs. That was what we said then. Here what he does is, he categorizes institutions in a culture group into two. One he calls primary institutions, the other secondary institutions. Listen carefully. When he says culture and personality influence each other, what he meant was this. Culture and personality influence each other, meaning there are institutions that are categorized as primary institutions and secondary institutions. Those institutions that are instrumental in influencing individual, they are primary institutions. Once certain personality traits are resulting from the primary institutions, because of such kind of characteristics, there is a change that would be rendered in the other institutions, they are secondary institutions. So it is a theory like, theoretically speaking, culture influences personality, personality influences culture. So there is one list of institutions there, there is the other list of institutions here. They influence personalities, and because of these personalities, certain other institutions are emerging, those are secondary institutions. An immediate question that might come is it not possible for them to mold them? That is not his idea. He is saying that there are some set of institutions that are dealing with child rearing, They are resulting in a particular personality of the individuals there. Having those personality traits, they are instrumental in giving rise to a set of institutions that are called secondary. If I give an example, it will be much more easier for you. Now, don't forget the usage of this word basic personality in the list of questions we have given. If the question is basic personality, you are actually writing about Gardiner's theory, which said that culture and personality influence each other. Basic personality is that one that is the result of certain institutions called primary institutions. Now, first you take this particular thing, then we'll come back. Primary institutions, he is listing a few: child rearing related, economic subsistence, food distribution, family system, cordiality in the family, marital systems. All these result in a kind of personality called basic personality. And all those individuals having the basic personality would give rise to religion, mythology, etc., etc. Those are secondary institutions. Whatever categorization he has given, that, can I go, sir? Whatever categorization he has given, that is based on one of his studies. This is the population he had studied, called Marquesas. One of the Central American population, Marquesas society. Interesting story there. Based on this study, he is giving the categorization. Sir,
I have a question.
Tell me.
Regarding Benedict and Mead, you said they worked on population sets or samples and they concluded the studies from there. So, if say we are interviewing some culture, or basically it's regarding Benedict, if you're interviewing some culture, they'll always give a positive side of themselves. Then why does she conclude, say, the Wakitul and the Yobo as dynastic?
Benedict. Yeah, one question you asked is, what he says is, whenever we are trying to get information from a culture group based on a sample, by default we try to give positive about our own cultures. And how was it possible for her to give certain negative traits? See, the kind of sampling system that we are speaking of, that she could not do in all the societies. Malinowski did was, he did not believe in bringing a big sample from different populations and trying to get information. It's not that way. Maybe 5, 6, 10 informers were there whom he was planting at different places and trying to get information which can be truly called emic information. When we were talking about Malinowski, there was no criticism given like a sampling thing, sampling error. Here the problem came when culture personality thinkers have chosen a particular way, when they were personally going there. They wanted to study a problem or situation. In this case, when Margaret Mead was studying Samoan society, she was very clear that she wanted to study adolescent behavior. To study adolescent behavior, she believed that, okay, instead of going to everybody and asking, or instead of depending on 1 or 2 people, let me pick up some girls and tell them that, see, I am going to get information from you, I am going to write a thesis on you. Over a period of time, she was observing them, the 60-odd girls, who is visiting them, what kind of diverse group is visiting them, and how the girl is responding to different situations. Because she was comparing, Mead was comparing adolescents in America to adolescents in Samoa. See, if I am an Indian of Asia, I might be having one kind of a perspective about Northern America. I may believe that America is a free society. This free thing is relative, drawing a big line beside a small line. For us, American society is a free society. But when Mead is comparing her own society of America with the Samoan society, she feels that Samoa is a free society compared to America. చెప్తున్నాను మాస్టర్, మేము ఆగలేదు. కంటిన్యూ, ఐ విల్ కంటిన్యూ. చెప్పాను కదా, ఒకసారి మొదలెడితే ఆగేది కాదు కదా. ఐఎమ్ స్టిల్ విత్ యూ. Mead says that adolescence in American society is a very frictional situation, traumatic situation for the adolescent. See, all of us must have come from that stage of adolescence, a stage of confusion, a stage of fantasies, a stage of why a parent is not asking me, not allowing me to do certain things. A strife-ridden, control-ridden, and a stressful stage. She was comparing adolescence in America, where children were asked to follow certain rules. Violation of the rules were resulting in punishments. She was comparing her society with Samoa. In Samoan society, she found that girls or adolescents in general were asked to take their own decisions. They were allowed, if you could notice in that documentary, they were allowed to experiment. Premarital sex is not actually something that is unallowed. It is not simply premarital sex. Extramarital relations are also accepted. See, the premarital sex is actually encouraged so that they are better prepared for the future. They were allowed to experiment. When she was comparing American society with the Samoan society, it is this dimension she is looking at. There are no strict rules in the Samoan society controlling the behavior of the individual when compared to America. So in that freedom, when they were brought up, they altogether have a different kind of adulthood. Now, in doing this, she has selected that 60-odd adolescent girls. Day in and day out, she was noting down things from them. She was asking different questions, getting responses from them about what kind of adolescence they are undergoing. When she was doing all this, the problem was the group she had taken up was the one that was giving fantasies as a reality. That was the problem. See, had she taken representatives from all the age groups, all the genders, I mean both the genders, etc., maybe the kind of picture of a Samoan society that we could get was altogether a different one. Are you following what I am saying? Based on later studies, when people had gone there after Mead, because she has sensationalized the Samoan population, so there was a beeline to Samoa. Several anthropologists were making roads there too. They found that what Mead was projecting was actually not existing. The kind of stories that she wrote about adolescence, they seem to be the fantasies of those 60-odd girls. That's where it is said that it's a sampling. Truly, she went there for emic idea. But then what she was getting was neither etic nor a true emic. What is non-existing there, they must have, they were giving. That was how. Am I? No. Can I go to the next one? Sir, this is Marquis' society studied by Cardinal. Master మాట్లాడాలి మీరు కూడా అప్పుడప్పుడు. Cardinal. An interesting one, maybe some of you might want to use these services. Before I tell the story, what do you do when you are in scarcest situation? There's high food scarcity, hunger, possible deaths. రిమోట్ అవసరం లేకుండా చేస్తున్నారు కదా జనాలు అసలు. అక్కడ కూడా అంతే. Such as extreme hunger, what do you do? You elaborate on that. Unconventional is not the answer. What do you do? She says cannibalism. Looks to be my alter ego.
Some people eat rats and insects.
Some people eat rats, some people eat. Huh? Sir? And she already said that. Some people may migrate. Somebody was saying, what's that? Meditation. లోపల ఫీల్ అవుతారా హంగర్ రేసు గుర్రం లాగా. This was one society that was actually having certain characteristics of this kind. Look at this. When there is high amount of food scarcity, they understood very well the reason. The reason is high population. The reason is high population. We also understood at one point of time there's problem of high population. We decided that okay, we will have to increase the food production, we'll have to reduce the population. We didn't resort to mass killings. We started consultations. We started requesting our people to reduce the population. When we request, people don't listen. Your approach is a different one. Look at the Chinese society, their approach was different. They understood that population was increasing. So they started operating, they started using their stick. Our stick is not so very strong, at least when it comes to population control. Prime Minister can only request us. They'll have to pursue us. They followed altogether a different way. They have certain other friendly neighbors. Reciprocity can be of different kinds. This is one reciprocity. Reciprocal female killing. Now you can't ask us, you can't ask anybody, why your choice is this? If you are asking somebody about why they have chosen one particular thing, you should also be able to give a rational answer for why you have chosen something else. You are rational in your own right, they are rational in their own right. That is anthropology. Reciprocal female killings, because I can't kill my own female. It's like I can't operate my own relative, my own son, my own daughter. And hence I am hiring somebody else, not for money, but I will also kill your female. You kill mine, I will kill yours. Over a period of time, it was observed that there was a scarcity of females, and hence you had to go for polyandry. So everything emerges from economic subsistence. That's the reason why he writes economic subsistence in the primary institutions. Because there is a problem in the economic subsistence, there is a food scarcity, they resorted to reciprocal female killing. Reciprocal female killing resulted in imbalanced numbers, and hence they had to go for polyandry. Once polyandry had happened, other problems naturally. Conflict between children and husbands, conflict among husbands themselves. Already children are facing the insecurity. Fathers do the other damage by demonifying the female. That see, you need her, I also need her, she is not here, she is somewhere else. So it's like whose nation who is making sacrifice. You were instrumental in killing the numbers, you decided that she should die, and you decided that okay, we will compromise with polyandry, and after that the resultant problems, for the resultant problem the female is blamed. So demonifying the female, bringing a feel of hatred among the children towards the mother, basic personality with a hatred for mother and the female in general. Under such circumstances, several myths are created, several folk tales come in. That is the reason why religion, myth, etc., they are written in the secondary institutions.
Shouldn't the marriage system be in the secondary institutions? It is a result of economic subsistence.
No, he wants to show the entire list of things involved with the child rearing. Child rearing is also something that is resultant of the kind of marital system. That is the reason why he is writing polyandry here. See, you can quickly say that, okay, marriage system is the result of the economic institution, so I will write there. His idea was different. Type of marriage is also guiding, is also influencing the child rearing practices.
So child rearing should be in secondary practices.
No, that's what I said. That's what I said. Right now we are not questioning him. It is his feeling. He felt that everything related to child rearing. When you are saying this, maybe you are thinking of Margaret Mead. The child rearing is a primary thing. But his idea is everything related to child rearing should come in the primary institutions. Okay. And all these institutions are actually resulting in a personality of this kind. With this personality, when you are bringing certain other institutions, they can be myths, they can be religion, they can be folklore, etc. All these are secondary institutions. So till the happening of this, whatever is there, all of them are in the primary institutions. Of course, we come and criticize now. How is it that religion is in the secondary institutions? It has to be in the primary institutions because, after all, whatever child rearing happens, that is based on certain belief systems, and hence religion has to be. But no, that is the criticism actually. The categorization itself is subject to your own study. In that particular society, he felt that way, and hence he is giving the classification. So, right now what the critics say is, there is no argument about culture and personality influencing each other, but in the case of Gardiner, the way he has categorized institutions into primary and secondary seems to be not valid universally. Am I clear to you? Any questions there? Tomorrow we will be writing a detailed note on culture personality school. Then I think some more things will be clarified. In the meantime, you think about this. I still did not talk about the other lady, that is Cora Dubo. Her concept we will be dealing tomorrow after we finish writing about the first three thinkers. Then we will pick up Ralph Linton. Have a great time. Good day. कुछ वीडियो देखे थे आप? हाँ. You finish writing this? Today is your 13th lecture. First thing we had seen was Margaret Mead documentary. I think you will have to do the homework also on this. You go home and watch this again. Margaret Mead documentary on Odyssey series. Odyssey, Odyssey, Odyssey series. And secondly, we were discussing culture, personality, school. The three thinkers, Mead, Benedict, and Gardiner. Mead, Benedict, and Gardiner. Sir, the source you are going to follow will be the class notes that we will write tomorrow. And one other video I asked you to watch in the assignments or the homework, coming of age in Samoa. Coming of age in Samoa. These days, after you started preparing for UPSC, maybe your number of visits to the theatre must have come down. That's why I am trying to do the needful.